we don't follow the Catholic Church because there's just too many things wrong with it. All right, the last one.
1643, Westphalia.
We gotta end this series now. I've been keeping this series on hold, so we're gonna end this series now. All right.
Representatives gather. Diplomats of the Holy Roman Empire, of Spain, of Sweden and Denmark, of Bavaria and Brandenburg. After years of negotiation, political and religious argument, and bartering, they finally seek to end the most destructive war Europe has ever seen. A war that through plague, massacre, and famine has almost become a force in itself. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the keys of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit. And
wait a minute, I just clocked something. What happened to the old narrator for the 30 years, not the 30 year, for extra credits? Why did he quit? I heard that he quit, but I never knew the details of why. Interesting.
Shut him up, and a seal set upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, when he would be unleashed again. Thanks so much to HelloFresh for helping to bring this episode to the table. A kingdom shattered, millions dead, and an endless conflict draining the finances and manpower of all who took part. How to put the demon back in the bottle. As long as the 30 Years' War remained a conflict centered on religion, it was a difficult thing to resolve. After all, the parties believed that as far as spiritual matters were concerned, there was an immutable right and wrong, orthodoxy and heresy with little room for accommodation. Even those who fought primarily for money or power had to cloak their motives in religion, making political compromise difficult, especially when external forces like the Catholic Church or larger Protestant neighborhoods had their say. But nearly 2 decades into the conflict, that started to break down. In 1634, representatives of Emperor Ferdinand and the Protestant state of Saxony met at Prague Castle to try and resolve the religious and political questions that had originally torn apart the Holy Roman Empire. And they actually hammered out a deal most imperial states could accept. Emperor Ferdinand agreed to walk back his counter-Reformation campaign, where he tried to stamp out Lutheranism and restore the religious map as it had been at the Peace of Augsburg. Saxony, in turn, agreed that its army would be part of the larger army of the empire, and that it would no longer make formal alliances with other states of the empire or outside powers. There was also...
Okay. This is why I said that the Holy Roman Empire was really confusing. Because it was a confederation, right? If I'm not mistaken. The Holy Roman Empire was a confederation, right? And a confederation is a state, right? You know how there's like a federation and then a confederation? I know, because I learned in American school, although I should probably take this with a grain of salt now that I think about it. I learned in American school that confederation is like a country where the states within that nation have more power, have more leverage, but a federation is where one central government has like more power, if that makes sense. So I'm like, is the Holy Roman Empire like a country, or was it a faction? If that makes sense, because the Holy Roman Empire was seen as the first German Empire, and the second German Empire was when Germany was unified. When Germany was unified, when it was the second German Empire, it wasn't like one state. It was like I know there was like Bavaria, Prussia, and other smaller German kingdoms that all decided to be like a part of like one thing, basically, until Mr. Schmittler came and like changed that up. So I'm like, because he said here that the Holy Roman Empire has an army, but I heard people told me that the Holy Roman Empire wasn't Germany. Unless we're like thinking about two different things. I don't even know. This is hurting my head already.
Also an amnesty for everyone who'd fought against the emperor, apart from the heirs of the now dead Frederick V. It was a reasonable peace, and other states of the empire joined in when the agreement went into force in 1635. However, there was a place where it didn't play well: France. Though Catholic and hostile to Protestants within France, King Louis XIII was an avowed enemy of the Habsburgs, and he feared being encircled by Spanish Habsburg territory in Spain, Italy, and the separate Habsburg branch ruling the Holy Roman Empire. And really, a strengthened Holy Roman Empire on his eastern border wasn't really what he wanted to see. So in 1635, he instructed his chief minister, Cardinal Richelieu, to enter the war on the side of the Protestants and attack Spain. It was a move that changed the entire nature of the war, turning a conflict of Protestant.
Oh, wow. And like France is like the juggernaut of Europe at this time too. Oh, okay. I thought this was gonna have a happy ending. I guess not.
And Catholic states into one of pro and anti-Habsburg factions. And with Spain tied down and the prospect of Protestant victory renewed, Sweden took the opportunity to jump back into the war. But it was different this time. There was an end goal in sight: grab enough territory to come to the negotiating table, and hopefully build on the Peace of Prague in order to achieve political goals. The tide swung in the anti-Habsburg faction's favor in 1640, and in 1641, Cardinal Richelieu was entertaining Habsburg envoys who tried to make a separate peace with France, but Richelieu insisted that all the allies must come to peace at the same time. And after a bit of wrangling, they decided on a place: the state of Westphalia. There they declared that two cities were to be exempt from the raging war to serve as negotiating centers: the Lutheran-controlled city of Münster and the universally Catholic Osnabrück, where they started to work on a treaty that would reshape Europe, even as the war continued to rage around them. But don't start imagining the United Nations here. You know, like with everybody in the same big room. This is still the 17th century after all, where communications and travel are incredibly slow, people get sick, and ambassadors have to wait for orders.
I was gonna say there, yeah. Like I keep forgetting that when the not the holy, I was gonna say the Holy Roman War and the 30 Years War. Yeah, I keep forgetting that the 30 Years War was in the 17th century, dude. This was like, funny enough, actually, 17th century was when Barbados was still early English colony. It wasn't even a British colony yet. It was still English colony, man. Jeez, because Barbados was settled by the English in 1625. And like, these time periods, man. I gotta remember these time periods, man. But yeah, I would imagine that everything would be slow as heck, especially in this time period. Like the 17th century is this is like what, Dutch Golden Age, I think. Yeah, I think this is the Dutch Golden Age.
Nations arrived in 1643, and various ambassadors from major nations like France, Sweden, Denmark, and Spain, plus representatives of small states in the Holy Roman Empire, just sort of filtered through for the next 6 years, trying to create a compromise everyone would accept. There were even side treaties. Spain and the Dutch Republic, for instance, ended the 80 Years' War, which had merged with the 30 Years' War, with Spain formally recognizing Dutch independence, but also winning religious tolerance for Dutch Catholics. And those same questions about religion.
Wait, what was the 80 Years' War? I knew about the 30 Years' War and the 100 Years' War. What was the 80 Years' War?
Religion fed into the other treaties made at Westphalia, ending the 30 Years' War. The agreement went by one simple principle: who rules his religion? No, you heard me right. After millions dead and decades of compounding misery, we are right back at the Peace of Augsburg. Glad we all did that, right, everybody? Okay, to be fair, there were a few key differences. Now, in addition to Catholic or Lutheran, rulers could choose to be Calvinist, and members of minority religions were free to practice in private or even in public during certain times allowed by the state. Hereditary Habsburg lands were exempt, however; they would be Catholic. But there were two even more difficult questions. How would the Holy Roman Empire's constitution change? And who would get the land that had changed hands? And here's where the war comes into the picture.
Let's talk about this for a second. I was actually discussing this with my brother in the car the other day. We were talking about the Catholic Church because the Catholic Church is, in our personal opinion, we don't follow the Catholic Church because there's just too many things wrong with it. And he was explaining how the Pope isn't even necessary anymore because after Jesus was crucified and died on the cross, he literally like I think, was it the Bible or was this what Jesus said? One of the two, but he basically said that like after Jesus died, like you didn't need anyone like the Pope anymore because you have your spirit. Your spirit is what guides you now, right? I think he said this is what the Bible said because he knows a lot about the Bible, way more than me. And he's like, yeah, the Pope is like necessary. Like you don't need that anymore. So that whole Pope thing is just no.
Because as the negotiations dragged on, the war tilted in favor of the anti-Habsburg faction. By 1648, Protestant armies were marching back into Prague Castle, marking the last major battle of the war and leaving the Imperial Spanish faction not much to negotiate with. Ferdinand III, son of the now dead Ferdinand II, was forced to give up much of the centralized power his father had seized, strengthening the German states and keeping the empire fragmented and difficult to control. A major foreign policy win for France. Plus, individual states of the empire could make treaties with each other, and France and Sweden now served as guarantor of the empire's constitution. Meaning, if Frederick tried to pull what his father had by shifting electoral votes, Sweden and France would invade the empire. And then came the land. That was the stickiest part, because as you'll recall, both Catholic and Protestant factions had started rewarding generals and sometimes troops with land. Unsurprisingly, these folks didn't want to give it up. But in the end, secular lands went back to who'd owned them in 1618, and church lands went to whoever owned it in 1624. So, Ferdinand got to keep Bohemia as part of his family lands, even though a Protestant army had just marched into it. But there were territorial changes, mostly favoring the anti-Habsburg faction. Sweden got territory that helped it control the Baltic Sea and major rivers. France got Alsace and areas it had taken a century earlier, but were now formally recognized. The Protestants
Alsace. Controversial. I've heard arguments for both sides that Alsace belongs to France. I've heard other people say Alsace belongs to Germany. Honestly, it wouldn't really bother me who owns Alsace because both sides have like good arguments for it. So I'm like, whatever. But I would probably lean towards, honestly, this is like one of those things where I would feel like equal. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I have an equal feeling towards it. So
the state of Brandenburg got bigger and more powerful, as did the southern Catholic state of Bavaria, which kept the upper Palatinate. The lower Palatinate, that went back to Frederick V's son. It was a peace that hobbled the possibility of German unification for another 2 centuries, and set Brandenburg, later known as Prussia, and Bavaria on a course to be Germany's dominant power players.
How do we stop?
The empire's center of rule shifted to Vienna, and with its new territory, France could threaten invasion whenever it wished. But while it's true that the treaty was trying to constrain Habsburg power, one has to be a little careful how you discuss the Peace of Westphalia. Later German nationalists, from Bismarck to the Nazis, would cast the treaty as part of a narrative of victimization, spinning it that the rest of Europe was trying to keep the German nation and its people down. But in reality, no single sense of nationhood or commonality existed at the time.
yeah, that's the thing. And like, this was before Napoleon. This is why Napoleon was so important, because without Napoleon, Germany probably wouldn't be united. You know? Like, a lot of these Germans, like, they all agreed that they were German, but they were so distinct from one another, which is actually quite cool, honestly. It's actually really, really, really cool. And a lot of these German dialects were borderline their own language, right? arguably their own language, quite frankly speaking. But it's still cool how, like, despite all of that, though, eventually they all came together and decided to just to create one German nation. Aside from Austria, although Austria was a part of that German nation, but eventually Austria can't ever join back Germany like ever again. Technically speaking, if you really want to get technical, you could also say that Dutch is also another German nation because they're also Germanic as well. Who else? Sweden is like a mix, so I wouldn't really consider them a German nation. Well, no. You could argue maybe Sweden. Denmark. I don't know the origins of Danish people. I heard that the Jutes were conquered by the Danes, so I don't know if they were Germanic or not. England, originally was a German kingdom, because, Angles and Saxons, they migrated to England. There's a bunch of Germanic kingdoms there. It's really cool, right? I was talking to someone about this before. I was like, when you really think about it, the Germans really did have a big impact on Europe because a lot of these Germans, they spread out and they eventually kind of like diverged into their own thing. And the ones that didn't, basically eventually came into what's now Germany. But I'm not going to elaborate on that here, though. I'm probably going to talk about that, like, on another video about Germany or something. But still, it's quite cool.
After all, this had been a civil war. And speaking of later interpretations, looking back, Westphalia was also a landmark because it set some precedent for the idea of state sovereignty. The concept that a government controlling a piece of territory should be free to govern that area and its people as it sees fit, without interference from other states. In fact, the Treaty of Westphalia has often been cited as a step toward the international order we have now, where secular authority supersedes religious power, countries control all within their borders, and diplomacy is conducted via a sole designated official, and not by a horde of nobles that throws someone out a window. Step in the right direction. Now, of course, exactly how big a step it was toward our modern world is still debated by historians. But at the time, one thing was certain. The Peace of Westphalia had stopped one of the most terrible wars Europe would ever witness. And though there would be more conflicts, it would not be until 1914, when a very different Europe, one with Germany, rather than the Holy Roman Empire at its center, would see the Four Horsemen ride again.
Ah, yes, the Second German Reich. Although I keep thinking Holy Roman War. The 30 Years' War, though, if I'm not mistaken, this was the war where everyone was like, hey guys, this whole religion thing, maybe it's not a cool idea anymore. So if I am correct, this war actually had a big impact because now you see a lot of these people in Western Europe. It set a precedent, frankly speaking, for anti-religion and especially anti-Christianity rhetoric that we have today. So if I am correct, after all, yeah, that was a big deal. No, that still is a big deal because, well, I don't really need to elaborate further on that. I think anyone who's been paying attention to today's world should know that, yeah, the impact is very visible. I don't really need to elaborate further. I don't want to talk about too much controversial things because YouTube does have a system where it checks your transcripts and if the AI bot thinks that you're talking about something bad, it'll literally not push out your video or you'll get a strike, right? So that's why I try to avoid from using stuff like swear words and anything that's remotely bad and try to avoid controversial terms, frankly speaking. But maybe in the future I might elaborate on more controversial stuff further, but we'll see. Anyways,
Oh man.
is that the end? Oh, it is the end. Alright, man. If you're new to the channel and you like what I have to say, check out my other reactions. Before you do that, though, make sure you subscribe if you aren't new to my channel and you do enjoy what I have to say in my videos. Make sure that you not subscribe, but make sure that you like to, let YouTube know that, hey, this guy is actually pretty interesting, and it allows YouTube to push my content out, because I do like it when people hear what I have to say, just as much as you people like it whenever I read your comments, even the long paragraph ones, and learn something from it, frankly speaking. So it's a win-win for both of us, frankly speaking. So yeah, I'm glad that this series ended. It gives me a lot more insight to the 30 Years' War. Definitely a lot of information that I have retained. And it's actually helping me learn history better in more chronological order, because I was learning things out of order before I created this YouTube channel. But now that I created this channel, I kind of with the help of y'all and y'all suggestions, which is why I tell y'all to suggest me content, for me to react to, I'm able to learn things in a much better order, and I actually am able to retain this information, much better, which is great. So yeah, man, thank you for watching, and goodbye.